Buddy, back to another special episode of Let's Talk Broncos. Lots to talk about today. First and foremost, though, if you try to get your tickets to see this year's training camp, you might have lost out. Tickets for the Back Together Saturday were sold out within 5 minutes. I know I was in queue for a couple of those dates. Guys, how are you? And how do you feel about ticketed training camp for the Denver Broncos in 2023?
Listen, I think ticketed training camps, Bree, I don't mind it. There were too many people there last time. For me, it's hot, and then you're like this around people. Like okay, I get it. Let the people in. I feel like maybe we should you can only go to a certain amount of training camps or something like that, so everyone gets their fair share. But is training camp, I don't know. I don't hate the ticketed idea. I really don't hate it at all.
Last year, you had 6,000 people show up. Apparently, Arapahoe County thought that was far too many, slicing that in half, coming up with 3,000 as the benchmark. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen to those tickets if people just don't end up showing up.
Yeah, I think this is awful. I totally disagree.
Wow.
The more the merrier. And I'm not surprised.
Nice of you to say from your on the field.
That elitist Joey Richards.
You're on the field.
Monocle to the show. I'm not anymore. And
but you were this whole other time. Yeah. You'll see. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to this.
I won't, because the tickets are gone. I do think that you should let all the fans come. This is one of the few events that fans can easily access. Tickets are crazy expensive to go to a Denver Broncos game, especially compared to other sporting events. This is something that's much easier for a family to go to. It's also in the middle of summer when the kids are off school. It's just an easy event. And I don't know, it's fun to fill up the berm. Have it be crazy. It shows fan enthusiasm about the team. Last year, there was a lot of fan enthusiasm, so things were packed. I think there'd be a good bit of fan enthusiasm this year, so things would be packed. But like the Case Keenum season, it wasn't packed. And I think, I don't know, I appreciate the metric there. I also just think, I don't know, it's fun. Let's have fan craziness. Have it be fun. Arapahoe County, boo. This is lame. I can't believe Joey's on the same side.
Okay. I can understand ticketing the weekends because obviously that's going to be pretty jam-packed. But what about a friend of the show, Mile High Prophet, who likes to show up to training camp if he has the off chance on a morning? Maybe he can't schedule ahead and he just wants to drop by. Hopefully there's a couple of extra tickets just floating around there. I didn't check before we went live to see if there were still tickets available for some of those off chance days in the beginning of August. I don't know if I love it, but I do think there has to be a capacity at some point. You can't turn people away at the door. I just don't know if ticketing is the way to go. The other interesting thing to point out is that training camp is now sponsored by Ford. This is not a sponsor or an ad, but just so that Broncos country knows that if you show up and show your fob, the first 30 fans who do so get a fast pass at the Ford Fast Pass tent to be granted an early entry and then the opportunity to sit in the front row. So showing up first on the line does not guarantee front row space on the berm. We are now over at Centura Health, I don't know. It just feels a little commercial to me.
People driving a Ford. That's gross. This is all gross. This should be all about the fan experience. He shows up first. I really don't like these changes. It doesn't matter ultimately, but I think this is bogus.
How do you feel, Broncos country, about the new changes to training camp? Go ahead and jump on our live stream, which you can do by searching Mile High Sports over on the Facebook or the YouTube. Get in the chat, talk to us right now. Let us know how you're feeling. We're going to have a show today about just, obviously training camp, what we're looking forward to, but we're going to hop into some other news. But first, Joey, I saw your hand. What else you got to add to this?
Guys, I can't come on this podcast and lie to the people. I can't do it. Zach made this comment about how fun training camp is. It's not that fun. I have to say, it's not that fun.
Why are you using it for other people? Just don't go yourself.
It's not that fun. It's not that fun.
Everyone who wants to go should be allowed to go.
Sure.
Why are we policing who?
Sure, you should be able to go. And then also, though, I don't I don't know, guys. I don't think you're missing out on that much. I really don't. Like, hey, you know what? It is what it is.
No, that's like saying, if you never experienced it, don't even worry. It's okay. You don't get tickets. You're not going to be able to go. You can't go to the preseason game. You can't go to the regular season games unless you set up, in the nosebleeds because they're just so expensive. But you know what? It's overrated. Don't even go. Like they sucked last year. It's probably going to be.
Bree, that hill is almost there as if they want the sun to hit you. It's like the Broncos don't want you to be there. That's how this hill is placed, right? Let's start there. They have little sunscreen things all around. Okay, that's nice. You better go every 20 minutes or so. You better walk over there every 20 minutes. And then also, if you show up on the wrong day, damn, it's a special teams day. Oh, what am I doing here? And it's fun when there's like some sort of like Drew Lock versus Teddy Bridgewater. And don't ever bring
a quarterback competition into this conversation again.
No, but that's when it's worthwhile. Is like, okay, I need to see it for myself. I need to see what's going on out there. Otherwise, I'm just watching. I don't know. I'm not watching much. What am I getting out of this? If I'm a casual viewer, what am I getting?
What are you getting out of it? Well, I'll tell you right here. As you're watching Let's Talk Broncos, we had some interesting news drop. James Palmer was letting everybody know that he's thinking that Tim Patrick is going to be the turnaround point for Russell Wilson. A lot of us watching along at home have been questioning what kind of difference Tim Patrick brings to the team. Obviously, getting injured last year during training camp was a solid blow to any sort of expectations from the wide receiver group. But let's talk about Tim Patrick first and foremost, and we'll get into the others here in just a moment. How do you feel about Tim Patrick returning? Is he wide receiver number one? I'm going to put that in quotation marks because we know how angry that makes a lot of people around town. But let's talk about what we think about Tim Patrick's return, how we see him in the tier group. Let's just say the core four. And guys, I'm going to start this off here because I was having a little conversation with y'all and I want to bring it to the Let's Talk Broncos community. Tim Patrick is the best wide receiver on the Broncos roster. And I think that although Jeudy has made strides, I think Courtland Sutton is obviously returning to form from injury. The top four wide receivers for the Denver Broncos have been embroiled in an injury concerns, and Tim Patrick was coming off of two back-to-back pretty impressive seasons. A lot of the NFL and a lot of Broncos country kind of had been not disregarding, but it was obviously as an undrafted wide receiver was coming in with low expectations. He continued to surmount those, work his butt off, and has been doing a really great job of coming in. For last season prior to his injury, he was slated as wide receiver one with no absolute flack whatsoever. I'm going to say he's still the best wide receiver coming back. I know it'll be a little bit of trepidation and hesitation with that injury, but I think he's going to return to form. I have very little doubt about it. Tell me how you guys feel about that. Is he the best wide receiver for the Denver Broncos going into this season?
I think so. I do actually think that he's so not. I don't know about going into this season. I would say if I were to grab their best versions of what we've seen from all the wide receivers, I guess Courtland Sutton I'm not including because best version of him was crazy. But here's how: if Tim Patrick can return to exactly what he was before injury, I would have Tim Patrick as my number one wide receiver on the Broncos depth chart in terms of yards, all of that. I really would. I think that Tim Patrick's fantastic. I think that and I'll tell you the main reason why, guys. My main reason as to why I believe this is it feels like most fans, because I think it's because he was undrafted, have this ceiling put on him where it's like he can't eclipse that ceiling. But when you look at all the athletic stats, how he tested, why couldn't he? I think that's just something I'm going to wait for or want someone to explain to me. Why couldn't he get past a certain level? I don't. That's the one part about Tim Patrick's game that I just don't understand. Everyone talks about him as being the most complete and also the most consistent wide receiver on the Broncos. And it's almost feels like that sounds great and it's awesome. That's a great tag to have as a player, but it almost feels like a slight a little bit because they're using that only because they think that he's hit his ceiling. He can't get past that. And I just don't believe it. I think that he can get better. Now, the injury is the big part of it and why I'm a little iffy about it, Bree. I'm going to put Jerry Jeudy above it if I'm predicting for this next year. But Tim Patrick, if I can guarantee that I'm getting the exact same guy, he would be my number one.
He wouldn't be for me. Even if I'm getting the same guy, he would be number two. I think the floor is probably highest with Tim Patrick. I do think you make a good point about Tim Patrick's untapped potential. I do think there is a level of untapped potential with him, though he is running out of runway with it. For starters, it's hard for me to see him taking a massive leap from 2021 until now, just because he hasn't, or from 2021 to now rather, just because he hasn't been playing football. So I don't think we're going to see some big leap next time he's on the football field. But even if you return to form, he's 29, so maybe he's the same guy he was in 21, or he slowly heats up, kind of like we saw with Jamal Murray and the Nuggets as the season goes on, and we see him eventually blossom and reach that next level. But I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy's 5 years younger than Tim Patrick and was amazing last year. He was one of the most productive receivers in the NFL. So against man coverage, what he did was historic. We only have the data going back to 2014, but that's still 10 years or 9 years of football. And in those 9 years, we have seen we've seen three receivers average more than 4 yards a route against man coverage. 2021 Cooper Kupp, who got MVP votes, was a first-team All-Pro Offensive Player of the Year with 4.22. Jerry Jeudy's in second, right behind that, at 4.19. Then you have 2020 Justin Jefferson, who was second-team All-Pro Offensive Rookie of the Year at 4.00. That's it in the last 9 years of football. That's torched man coverage that badly. If you drop the bar down to 3.8 or above, you can get 2014 AJ Green. So we're talking peak AJ Green, second team All-Pro at 3.97, or 2020 Davante Adams, peak Davante Adams, first team All-Pro, 3.89. He was number 30 against zone. This is out of 102 qualifying receivers. So again, ranks pretty well. That sandwiches him right between AJ Brown and Brandon Ayuk. So even though he's lesser against zone, he still ranks out favorably there. And some of that's the product of the fact he was in the worst passing offense against zone last year. Russell Wilson really struggled against zone coverage, and that kind of hurt Jeudy's production there. The year before with Teddy Bridgewater, who was one of the more productive quarterbacks against zone, Jeudy ranked 18th. So it's shown that ability to beat both. Was 12th overall already this year. The guys ahead of him are Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Davante Adams, Chris Olave, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Christian Watson. Like a really good he's already there, like in my opinion, and there's way more. Like in the same way, I agree. Tim Patrick is more in the tank. Jerry Jeudy's 5 years younger, and Jerry Jeudy's not coming off a serious injury, which we haven't been able to say for a while. He had his ankle issue, I guess his second year, that kind of marred things. I'm going to bet on Jerry Jeudy. I think the consistency thing is maybe a point, but he was actually the Broncos' most consistent receiver last season in terms of standard deviation. So I think he's already proven some of those consistency things wrong.
I agree. So last year, Jerry Jeudy did a really remarkable job coming back up to what the expectations were in place for him as to where he was drafted. But I have to put a pause here because a lot of what's going to rely on these wide receivers' success is going to be A, Russell Wilson, and B, Sean Payton. I think Tim Patrick is a prototype wide receiver for Sean Payton, and I believe that the most chemistry, we saw it last year coming into training camp, Russell Wilson and Tim Patrick have a pretty strong bond. The only way the Denver Broncos see success this year is if Russell Wilson is A, functioning, and B, has a receiver in which he's going to favor in the end zone, which I can only see it being Tim Patrick, given his strengths. He's a big-bodied receiver, high football IQ, just really what you're going to want out of Russell Wilson, and his combination is going to be more Tim Patrick style. I'm not saying that it's a against Jerry Jeudy, but the explosive playmaking abilities outmatches route running to me. And I just unfortunately see that's the direction that this 2023 iteration, maybe in general, maybe as we move past this season, but I think this season in general, it's going to be Tim Patrick. Joey, you have a question for us?
Yes. Zach, I saw your hand up though. Do you want to go real quick?
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just wanted to say I fully agree with your prototype point, Bree. I do think that's the one thing that gives me pause. I think Tim Patrick is perfect for the Sean Payton offense. So that points in his favor. I will say on the chemistry thing, though, I think we saw as the season went on that Jerry Jeudy kind of became Russell Wilson's guy more and more. Early on it was Sutton, and then I felt kind of lost his trust in Sutton some and started leaning on Jeudy more heavily as the season went on.
Because Tim Patrick wasn't there. That's all I'm saying.
True, but I'm just saying on the point of chemistry, he had what? He got traded in like February, and then they worked like crazy in the summer. He had like 5 months working with Tim Patrick up until now. He's had, 12 in that same time, the 12, 16 working with Jerry Jeudy. So how much does that chemistry carry over would be
I think it might just be, but I totally hear you, Zach. I think that you're right, that they've had more time to bond in real NFL-like scenarios, which is the only place that it really matters. I just think that all of that's going to be overrun. And I think I have a straight bias when it comes to Tim Patrick being above Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with you guys, but I have a question. I want to ask you guys, so we're kind of going, it feels like we're all going Tim Patrick, or we're going Tim Patrick, or we're going Jerry Jeudy. Does that are we around the table that makes Courtland Sutton number 3?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I mean, maybe we see him finally blossom, but last year he was almost 24 months removed from the ACL. And I think he was a good starting receiver. I think let's modulate the conversation. I don't think it's Courtland Sutton sucks or Courtland Sutton's amazing. There's a gray area in there. And I think I think he's a fine starter as the wide receiver market starts to shape out. I think he's paid about right, maybe a couple million, Rich, but like not the end of the world. And I don't know. I think he's a good number 3, and I think that's what he'll hopefully be for the Broncos this year.
I like the idea of modulating the conversation, Zach, because I think how we have to look at best wide receiver is a little bit out of the scope of how are they going to flourish in Sean Payton's offense alongside Russell Wilson. So I think your most targeted wide receiver, your most reliable wide receiver is probably going to be Tim Patrick. But then when you take Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and then KJ Hamler, who I'm going to consider in the top 4, the core 4, is going to not be a ranking so much as a specialty fit. So you're obviously going to be wanting a lot of different things from your receivers. Do I think that means best? No, I think there's comparable attributes to both Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, but Sutton's going to be doing things that Jerry Jeudy maybe isn't great at. We've talked about the point of contention for the football, which Sutton has been struggling with since returning from injury, but I'm hoping to see him flourish in that. I'm hoping this is the year where he's able to return to form, to the previous injury, Courtland Sutton. Would that make him a better wide receiver than Jerry Jeudy? Potentially, but not oft, because you're almost hoping that they get utilized for who they are as a player, which we've seen the Denver Broncos kind of hope to Coop says it's so good to see you guys. I got distracted. It's so good to see you, Coop. Thanks for joining the chat. Frankie Abbott, Samuel Castro, and Cal are also in here. If you want to join along with us, go search Mile High Sports over on Facebook or YouTube. We're embroiled in a very deep discussion about the Denver Broncos wide receivers, and that's going to tip off what we've come here to talk about today. That's 3 things we want to see at Broncos training camp, and I want to talk about the core 4, the wide receivers. We're already talking about, we've already covered it. If you guys have anything else, because I think we have a discernment to figure out of who the core 4 actually is. I just named them: Tim Patrick, Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. Zach, I think I know where you're going to go with this one. Where do you deviate?
Well, I actually agree. I think that's the core 4 as it's known in Broncos country. I'm excited to see what they look like on the field together. But I think, Bree, you're a WWE fan. I think I mean, I don't know enough to reference it, but we were going to have a wrestler sneak up from behind and take someone out of the ring. One of those famous backstabs in the sense of Marvin Mims or Marquez Callaway or Kendall Hinton or anyone. I like KJ Hamler to me. What was such an exciting draft pick at the time. We've seen these flashes that are very exciting, but we haven't seen a lot of actual football from him. And the draft investment in Marvin Mims, when you consider the trade up, like really isn't all that different. And he's got a full rookie contract while KJ Hamler's about to expire. And KJ Hamler's from the Elway regime, not the George Payton regime or like the George Payton, Vic Fangio pair up, any of that, from the Elway era. Like I just, the more and more I think about it, I think he's the odd man out unless he proves to be like a really dynamic kick returner. I think he's the odd man out at wide receiver. So I think Marvin Mims or someone else will kind of replace him in the core for it.
Zach, even kick returner, though, very, very competitive this year. You mentioned Marvin Mims. We also picked up a cornerback. I forget his name right now. It's Tremont
Smith.
Tremont Smith, really good punt and kick returner. There's competition there. It would be almost – I think it would be harder for him to make it as a returner than it would for him to make it as a wide receiver. Like that's kind of the situation we're in there with KJ Hamler. It's just, you know, I kind of have to throw all my preconceived notions about what these wide receivers and how good they are and everything like that. And what I've heard, how the coaching staff likes them in the past out the window. Because I know what Sean Payton's going to come in with a completely different ideology of what he's looking for from all of these wide receivers. That fourth guy, it could really be anybody. I have no idea. I think there's just as good of a shot as KJ Hamler being that guy as there is Kendall Hinton. But where I do agree with Zach is that Marvin Mims was handpicked by Sean Payton. That's the part where it's like, ooh, you know, out of everybody in this wide receiver room, the guy that was really handpicked by Sean Payton was Marvin Mims. It's the only guy we really know on this team. And I would also say Tim Patrick from what we're hearing about from the media. But I would say Tim Patrick and Marvin Mims are the only two guys that I would say I know for a fact Sean Payton likes. We've heard Jeudy in trade discussions. We've heard Courtland Sutton in trade discussions. I haven't heard them mention a Kendall Hinton at all. You know, you could go down the entire list. It's hard to say who's going to be that fourth guy at this point. I think it'll shake itself out in preseason. You'll kind of notice. I think Broncos country should really focus on what Sean Payton is talking about and who he's highlighting in these press conferences, right? Because he's not a guy that is going to hold back his feelings. He's going to tell you. You're going to be able to know whether Sean Payton likes somebody or dislikes somebody. Very Vic Fangio-esque, I would say, in that way.
Guys, we got a special chatter over in the chat. Locked On Broncos' very own account is over here letting us know that there's optimism. Marvin is ready to go for the start of camp. So here we go with that type of news. What's really interesting to me is Samuel Castro is already throwing out the idea. What if Mims goes out in camp and outshines Sutton or Patrick? Do you guys see that as a possibility because he's been handpicked by Sean Payton?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I wouldn't bet on it. It wasn't my evaluation of him coming out of the draft. Thank you, Locked On. I don't know if it's Sarah or Cody, but either way, appreciate you. Hope to see you guys for camp here soon. But with Mims, I think it's going to be toasty out there. They'll be in the nice shaded bit, I think, unless Sean Payton's throwing them far away too.
There's a little bit of stirring there. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Interesting. But anyway, sorry, Mims. I think it's possible, but I wouldn't bet on it. Like Sutton's a good wide receiver. Tim Patrick, like we were just saying, maybe can return to form and maybe even find a new level. He's an immense talent, and James Palmer's reporting he's been the best receiver at camp. So I wouldn't bet on it, but it's totally possible. He's a second-round pick, is Sean Payton's handpicked guy, and he does fit a niche in that offense. I think Tim Patrick and Jeudy have vertical capabilities, certainly, but they're not true downfield burners. That's something Marvin Mims would add if he could break into the starting rotation. I imagine it'd be for Sutton.
Yeah, so outshine them, I would say there's a possibility. I think, yes. get more reps than them? I would say absolutely not. Here's the thing. If Marvin Mims outshines them, that's going to make the Broncos want to move on from one of those wide receivers even more than they already have showed interest. And to do that, you're going to want to highlight them. You're not going to want to bench them. If there's any Nuggets fans in the chat right now, you guys remember what happened when the Nuggets benched Bones Highland? What happened to his trade value? It tanked. You're not going to want to do that with any person that Marvin Mims outshines. So I would say that outshines in camp, possible. More snaps until one of them is gone? Absolutely not. That's my take.
It's all very interesting. It's a conversation we're going to get into, and then we'll see how it shakes out for this season, because the Broncos are going to have to dwindle what they have on roster right now, get it down to the 53, which will mean how many wide receivers do the Broncos carry into the season? Are we saying 7?
I think 6.
Ooh.
It depends. The one position that gets the one more, it just depends on special teams, right? Like that's why you add that guy. Shout out to a guy like Brandon Johnson too. That's a guy no one talks about, and he shined through preseason last year. I would say probably 6, but I could see 7 if one of these guys is just some special teams stud, and wide receiver is a position that translates well to special teams. A lot of really good special teams players are wide receivers.
I'm going to have a hard time picking. I'm going to say 7 is what I hope they go for, but I'm saying 6 because I think Sean Payton knows exactly what he wants already. He's not leaving a whole lot to chance. You guys should Rochambeau for who goes next.
Zach, I will allow Zach to take it, save best for last, everything like that. So go ahead, Zach.
Sounds good. Well, Joey burying Javonte Williams in a big spot, because that's what I'm most excited to see. Number 2 on the list here, Javonte Williams and what he looks like. Now, granted, I don't think we're going to get the best feel for it in training camp. It's not going to be full contact, obviously. And I think that's when we really see Javonte Williams' elite talents really shine, is when he's running through guys and has all these guys leaning on him and he's shaking them off like they're children on the playground. I'm still excited to see it. I don't know. Javonte Williams, I think I'm speaking for a lot of Broncos country here, but following the team as an analyst, Javonte Williams quickly became one of my favorite players on the team. Is such a amazingly fun watch, from like the angry runs to like what he does as a blocker, to what he does as a receiver, to what he does even in open space when like no one's on him. He is just such a fun player. I'll argue the most fun player on the Broncos. I might be forgetting someone very easily, but I think he's just,
I think you're right.
He's a blast. He's so dang fun. Jeudy's maybe in that combo when Jeudy's really rolling, but Javonte's amazing. And it sucks that, like, I'd say Courtland Sutton was the guy before his injury. And I hope we don't have another one robbed from us. And I'm just excited to see Javonte tearing it up. Also, because camp has like limited contact, you generally see running backs just tear off 20-yard runs. And it's not real 20-yard runs, but you just see them tear off, and they run down to the berm where all the fans are, and they like throw the ball to the fans, or they wave to them, or do a little celebration. And Javonte Williams is going to have like 10 of those this training camp. And so I'm super excited.
Zach, in an era of the Denver Broncos where we haven't been able to have a lot of fun, a lot of things to look forward to, the Javonte Williams injury really was a remarkable amount of whiplash for all of Broncos country. And that's nothing against Tony Jones or Tyler Beatty, but I'm worried. Beatty? I keep saying that, and I never know which one. Beatty. There's nothing against either of them. Samaje Perine obviously coming in is going to be a little bit of a difference maker here, but I'm really looking forward to Javonte Williams. And if the Broncos want to rely on the run, they're going to have to use him. I miss seeing him. I miss getting excited to watch him play football. And Joey, I so rudely cut you off. Please continue.
No, it's okay. Zach, I have to say this. I think you're propelling the exact thing that I don't want to see. I don't want to see anyone judge Javonte Williams off of training camp. That's the last thing. And I know that's not exactly what you're saying. You would just want to see him excel. I just don't even want people to pay attention to it, because What has happened literally the last 2 off seasons? Oh, Javonte doesn't look like that guy in training camp, man. I don't know. Javonte's game is for physicality. That's where he looks good. The scat backs are always going to look better in training camp. They just are. They definitely are. When you see them cutting and making all these cuts and juking and doing everything like that down the field while no one's actually touching them, they're going to look great. Javonte is a powerful runner. He wants to lower his shoulders. He wants to hit you. He wants to drag you down the field for an extra 5 yards. That's where he excels. And that's why these last 2 Aussies and everyone's like, yeah, this Javonte guy, it doesn't really – rookie year, it was that he doesn't look that great. The second year, it was that he didn't look like he got any better. That's what it was. And it's just because Javonte's game isn't meant for that. The first time I think we're actually going to see if Javonte Williams is back to the same player is when we are actually in a live contact setting. I'm talking about preseason if he's ready to go. I'm talking about regular season. That is where Javonte will excel. So as much as I would like to see him do great in training camp, I don't expect it, and I don't want people to expect it either. That's kind of my thing.
And they shouldn't expect it, but I'll say, like, you got to crawl before you run, you know? And let's see him run. I don't know, before we're expecting him to carry 5 people on his back, because I agree. We won't know if Javonte Williams is Javonte Williams, in my opinion, until September at the earliest. We just won't know. But we are – what? It happened in October. So we're 8 months away from this guy's knee fully exploding on a nationally televised broadcast. I guess it was national, but like a large section of the nation saw his knee explode, like 3 ligaments. What's that PFF doctor's stat? Like 30% of guys never even return to the field, and 60% never return to form. Until September, and it probably will be maybe even further down the road, because if we don't see it immediately, we can't cross it out then. But at the earliest, it won't be until September until I think we'll be able to judge that 60% threshold. But just getting over that 30% barrier and getting back on the football field, I think is going to be a huge win and something else.
No, totally. Just seeing him run around will be a big, like, let's go. Because he shouldn't. That's the main reason he shouldn't be. So if just him going out there and running around, it's like, wow, this is awesome.
As unintentionally freakish that his accident was, so was the good news that there wasn't any long-standing I'm trying to remember the wording for this because I'm not a doctor, but barring all the ligaments actually being terrible, there wasn't that long-standing cartilage issue that you would expect from that injury. So he actually fared really well with that. So there's a chance that it's actually not as bad as we all had feared, worst case scenario wise. But either way, I think I'd want all of my ligaments to maintain untouched. Thank you. Especially after, I'm never going to want that to happen. Joey, we've saved the best for last. Give us what top thing you want to see out of training camp for the Denver Broncos.
All right, guys. I said it at the beginning of the podcast that I don't really think there's a ton to take away from sitting there and watching the training camp. I really just don't. There's certain things, whatever, you know, I think the most interesting part of this is the media availability after every practice, where they're actually sitting there asking these players questions. And, you know, it takes a trained ear to sit there and listen and to tell who's telling the truth or not, but you can tell. Right. And what I want to hear is players genuinely excited to play in Vance Joseph's scheme, and then also just to play under Vance Joseph. That's something that I really want to see. Losing Evero, this defense, I'm worried, takes a big step back. I think that the idea with Vance Joseph, as it's been said, though, hey, we're not changing the scheme all that much. I think it's going to be Vance Joseph defense. That's what I think it's going to be. And, you know, there might be some people in the locker room that came under Evero and Fangio and played under that scheme that aren't necessarily that excited about switching it up completely. So I just want to see people genuinely excited. That would give me some hope for this Vance Joseph defense. What is your guys' opinion there?
Yeah, I would like to see it because it would maybe give me some excitement about the Vance Joseph defense.
Right, exactly.
I'm not excited about this adoption. It's like, wow, we were on the cutting edge. Like Vic Fangio devised the system that kind of stumped the McVay Shanahan offenses for a while. And then his defense became all the rage. I forget the number, but something like 17 of the NFL's defensive coordinators now have their roots in the Fangio tree. Like, just crazy how much he's influenced the league. And then you have Evero, who's like the hip modern version of Fangio and is doing he did simulated pressures, which is the, I think, most modern forward-thinking defensive thing at the highest rate in the league last year. So you're just hyper modern, hyper smart, and then you go back to like a Legion of Boom era defense with like Vance Joseph. These defenses that we've seen just get torched by Mahomes and these generational quarterbacks across the league now. And I'm not super excited about it. I think what he did in 2021 with a really talent-poor defense is impressive. I think that showed amazing coaching with like getting defensive backs to play above their talent level. But Christian Parker already has that covered. So I don't really know what I'm supposed to get super fired up about with Vance Joseph.
Yeah, it's worrisome, man. It just
how quickly do you turn? How quickly do you turn? So in the press conference after a loss, and you're able to say, you know, that guy doesn't sound very genuine with those statements that he's making. How quickly before Broncos country uses this as a scapegoat of, well, we told you the defense was going to be bad. We told you Vance Joseph was the wrong choice. How quickly does that happen? What do you have to see as far as production within a game for that to be a common qualifier? That's my worst case scenario. That's my nightmare of the minute it starts to regress, which we were anticipating it to do so, is that there's going to be conversation about the mistake that it was bringing Vance Joseph back to Denver, which I do not agree with. I'm just saying, where does that point happen?
Yeah. I think, Bree, I think he's kind of said it. I think it's set up where, and I said this in an earlier episode as well, it feels like it's set up to where Vance Joseph is going to be the fall guy. When that happens, I'm not exactly sure. It could literally be week 1 where Broncos country is already on his butt. You know, that's something that I think could definitely happen. He already kind of, I think he's going to have to work his way into the fan base's heart as a good defensive coordinator. I literally think he's gonna have to work his way there because he's starting off in negative. He feels like a fall guy. He really does to me.
Sometimes there'll be a problem kind of with the Broncos that I overlook. Like last year was the coaching, where it was like, oh, I don't know, these guys are really inexperienced. And I was just like, yeah, but there's all these other good things. And also kind of like the bad Russell Wilson stuff. I kind of overlooked that. And I tend to focus a little more on the positives. And that's something I'm trying to grow on. I'm trying to not overlook those negative things this year. That burning smell I'm picking up on, that like something's not right here, is with the defensive line. Or really just the defensive front in general. To Joey's point, I could see this defense, and national expectations are still high. I was just listening to an athletic season preview where they were projecting the Broncos as a top 10 defense in the NFL. And it's hard for me to envision. I think the secondary is there, but it's hard for me to envision that with how much you're relying on, you know, Riley Moss and Damari Mathis at cornerback, one of those two. I believe in both to an extent, but I do think like they're inexperienced. It could go bad. And I think the defensive backfield is the strong suit of things. You look at the edge rushing group with Randy Gregory, who can't stay healthy, and Baron Browning, who's having his own health concerns, and Frank Clark, who hasn't been there in a while, or hasn't been at a good level in a while. Nick Benito, I think, had a relatively disappointing rookie year. Jonathan Cooper's maybe the one you feel really good about. And then you look at the defensive front, and you've got DJ Jones and Zach Allen. And I don't know. I could see things if things go wrong for this Broncos season, I think we'll be looking back at the defensive front as one of the key reasons.
So, Zach, I think, though, that would be the logical take, that the defensive front might be the actual issue. It just feels like that blame is going to then be passed on to Vance Joseph.
Oh, I agree. I was trying to agree with you. I think we will see the defense take a step back this year, and
as it should, with the talent on the team, it should. Like, that should be expected, that it takes a little bit of a step back.
And the coaching's lesser. Like, I think Ejiro Evero is a top 4 defensive coordinator in the league. I think this is his last year as a defensive coordinator because he's very quickly going to be a head coach. And I don't think Vance Joseph's at that level.
I'm puzzled over here. There's a comment in the chat from YouTube user, and that's all it is. So I'm just like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could leave anonymous. Anyways, Colton Cooper said, I'll do that every single time. I read it like Ron Burgundy. Coop says, should we have maybe paid Draymond? Pain.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
that's one thing. They need Zach Allen to be a big player.
You know what it is?
That many. It's like in the NBA, you only have so many max contract slots. Like in the NFL, you only have like room for so many big investments. Those being like first round picks, financial investments, and the Broncos have swung and missed on some big investments. Like
Sutton, Zach, I do have to say though, dude,
you got to hit on Allen.
No, totally. And you do. I'm less worried about the Draymond to Allen thing. Because, yes, I think that it's a little bit of a step back. But, hey, sometimes you have to do that. You take a little bit of a step back. You need to save money to put it in positions elsewhere. The case may be. That's fine. It's who's after that is what's really scaring me.
1,000%. All the more reason you need Allen to be a difference maker. Because what's around him is poor. So, and it'd be true if they just re-signed Draymond, too. I think Draymond would have been more of a known commodity, though maybe not in Vance Joseph's defense. But whoever they gave all that money to on the defensive line has to be great because he's not going to be surrounded by much.
Is it championship behavior? Could the Denver Broncos perhaps maybe glint some sort of lesson from recent champions, the Denver Nuggets? I think we have something to talk about, and maybe we'll do so next week. It's time for everyone's favorite point of the show. It's for Joey's question of the day.
Yes, it is. I have a question for you guys. The Joey's question of the day today is: should Chris Harris Jr. or Aqib Talib be in the Hall of Fame in your guys' opinion? Do you think that they have enough of a resume to eventually get in the Hall of Fame? Yes or no?
Okay, so
also, if you say yes, I want to know which one.
For as long as the NFL and the Hall of Fame has been a thing, there is a point in time in which the Hall of Fame is supposed to be like the upper echelon, the best of the best, the blew your socks off and did even more than was expected out of the top tier of the position. It's supposed to be those players like a Peyton Manning or a John Elway or I'm not going to name them all, but you know what I'm saying. They're supposed to be the most miraculous players to ever play the position. At least that's what the Hall of Fame meant to me. Now, as you go on, as more years pass, you're going to have to start admitting more and more people into the Hall of Fame, to the likes of which people start discussing whether or not Eli Manning is a Hall of Fame quarterback, which the answer, I don't think so. Is Russell Wilson a Hall of Fame quarterback? It remains to be seen. So I love both Aqib Talib and Chris Harris, but I don't know if they're Hall of Fame level in there. That's hard. Ring of Fame, I think both of them deserve to be there.
Yes.
I think on Hall of Fame, so Aqib Talib, for me, it's a no. Looking at the Hall of Fame monitor, which isn't perfect, but I do think it's a pretty good metric. You can find it on Pro Football Reference. Aqib Talib has a score of 45.9. The lowest rated defensive back, cornerbacks and safeties, currently in the Hall of Fame is Dick LeBeau at 48.2. Aqib Talib's behind guys like Rodney Harrison, though Rodney Harrison's gotten some momentum, so I think there's just like an outside chance. But I'd say it's pretty unlikely. Only one first-team All-Pro, 5 Pro Bowls would be lower to what we see in the Hall of Fame. The average score for a Hall of Fame defensive back is 98. So a good way off there. Chris Harris Jr., though, sorry, really quick, has a chance. He'd be between, he's a little below John Lynch and is between John Lynch and 3 guys at the very bottom with a score of 61.8. I do think he has a chance because the Hall gives people credit for a place in history. Sometimes, like pioneers of their position. Like Shannon Sharp at tight end, though, of course, he was also incredibly accomplished. Some of the more accomplished kickers and kick returners, specialist positions mainly. But slot corner being a relatively new thing, Chris Harris Jr. was like the first elite slot cornerback. That might be enough to nudge him over the top. I would bet no, but maybe 15 years from now or 20 years from now, he ekes in, but it'll be after a wait.
Yes. Okay. Dude, I understand. Well, actually, I don't even. I just said I understand. I don't understand that stat at all, or how it works. But I trust you when it comes to that type of stuff, so I believe you. My whole thing with the Hall of Fame and why I even asked this question is because it drives me insane. I was thinking about this today. The Hall of Fame is just narrative driven. It's so narrative driven, man. I don't think it really even – I think Chris Harris Jr. has an argument because I think that he might have been the first and best nickel corner. Like, how can I make an argument? Like, I don't think there's anyone that would say you're absolutely wrong, that he's not even in that conversation as the best nickel corner. How can somebody be in the conversation at a position for the best and not make the Hall of Fame? And then if I'm going Aqib Talib, do the Broncos or like what his personality brings to a locker room and then also his play on the field, when you start looking at, hey, interceptions and pick sixes and defensive players, how many defensive players have scored touchdowns? Aqib Talib is right up there on the top of the list. I don't know. The Broncos are one of those teams that just are never going to get the benefit of the doubt like a Pittsburgh Steelers or a Dallas Cowboys would getting into the Hall of Fame. You go back and look at some of the guys that have gone in there, and there's plenty of Broncos that have a better case than some of their worst guys that have got in the Hall of Fame, right? It drives me insane how narrative-driven it is. I think that if Chris Harris Jr. specifically, I'll highlight him on this, were on a Dallas Cowboy or a Pittsburgh Steelers team, it would be a lock. I do believe that.
I like it. Yeah.
I think that's the convincing of the voters. And we've seen it happen with those that we thought were potentially first ballot Hall of Famers, maybe not necessarily make it because they're just not getting talked about enough. There's some very funny comments coming through. If you want to read them, you actually have to go on over to YouTube because I'm not going to read them on air, but they're good, guys. I appreciate you. That will do it for the end of the show. Felt like a fun time, guys. I really had a lot of fun. Coop's comments still up over there. I wanted to highlight that longer. Can you tell everybody where they can find all of your work as we head into this new fall season of football? That feels weird saying it's just barely summer. Zach, go first.
Yeah, I am going to shout out milehighsports.com where you can find all my Buffs work. I just had a Buffs column drop today, and it's a banger. Looking at the strongest position groups on the Colorado Buffaloes. I think I've got some hot takes in there. So I'm excited to see people get mad at me. And then
I'm going to be the one mad at you.
And then YouTube for the show. Let's Talk Broncos. Go over there, engage in the conversation. Appreciate Sam Castro, Cal, Coop, all the people that joined us in the chat, Cody or Sarah, whoever that was.
Frankie was here for a second. Frankie, I don't know where he went.
Always appreciate it. Join the Let's Talk Bronco community over on YouTube. That'd be the last thing I shout out. Joey and Bree, where can they find you?
Yeah, please, everybody just follow me at JR Drafts. I'll repeat what Zach said. Go over to the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. Please subscribe. A lot of content coming on there. More to come. I think, Zach, Bree, and I have been texting a bunch about what is coming up for this NFL season, and I think we have some ideas rolling and some fun things that will come in the future on that Let's Talk Broncos page. So make sure you're going to subscribe to that. The other part I have is Frankie and I also go live every single Thursday. So tomorrow, Frankie and I will be on Let's Talk Broncos YouTube exclusive. So if you guys want to see Frankie and I, go over there. Yeah, guys, that's all I really have.
Cal said, battle me in the Discord if you'd like to talk Broncos 24/7 and some other things. We've got different channels. Go join the Discord. We'll tweet out that link again. But the best thing you can do is support us here at Let's Talk Broncos, whether it's following us over on Twitter, Facebook, go over to the YouTube, Let's Talk Broncos. You can find us and you can support us and you can listen, leave a like, subscribe, follow me over on Twitter, BreeMaces303. I release all my stuff over there. Have a good night, everybody. And make sure you tune in tomorrow. And we'll see y'all.
Go Broncos.